Welcome to the 12-Step Recovery Evolution podcast. Visit recoveryevolution.co.uk for more episodes, helpful resources and links to our social media. Also visit the site for information on how you can attend a future Zoom session or workshop live. Thank you.
Morning everybody. I'm having a great day. Went out for my bike ride. Glad I don't run my life by my feelings. Top tip there. Can't run your life by your feelings. Bit fickle, the feelings. I've been reading a lot about what they said about what Boris was saying yesterday, but I felt quite clear on what he said myself, based on the fact that I think it's a bit of a perspective thing that he's trying to stop us or do their best to make sure this virus don't spread, and keep it in that context. It all made kind of sense to me that they don't know the way forward. But again, the reason I'm sort of saying that is because I think even this talk this morning, I think people are looking for answers all the time. And the same for myself. I'm always looking for answers. I want to know what the main event is. I want to know, I want to know what the end. I want to know how to get to the end. And I usually find that that people are trying to figure out, get the answers to all of these problems. And I think, again, even think going back to that talk last night, that they're saying we don't really know the answers. All we can do is steer our way through. And don't want to go on about too many conservatives, but also watched that programme, I think it was on Saturday night, that Winston Churchill story about how he was trying to make the decision whether to go to war or to surrender, and all that he went through to come to that decision. And based on everything we were talking about last week, and again, ultimately, if I could say to everything that I'm saying and trying to tell people, it's not about necessarily trying to give everyone the answers. It's about trying to understand there's a process. And if you stop trying to manipulate the process to get the outcomes you want and start trusting in the process, then you will start getting the outcomes that are most favourable to you. And so even that, I really highly recommend watching it if you've got a BBC catch-up, the Winston Churchill programme that was on Saturday night. Really good. Had me in tears. What an incredible process, and with incredible difficult decisions that he had to make in that one point. There was no good decision to make. There was like, which is the better decision to make that's going to give us the more chance of survival in the long term. And I think it's such a good film to watch, but again, keep it into the perspective about the process, not actually the outcome. Because again, it's just so important to keep highlighting that to people, is to say, look, this is a process. Having had a spiritual awakening, that means becoming conscious of the spirit inside yourself. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of this process, then you're going to come to better outcomes in your life. So again, even reading this is this. I call it more about sex, but that's because that's the worksheet that we did at work to try and add a little bit more clarity to this. But it is page 68, which is actually now about sex, which is kind of more about relationships. But again, as we're reading through this, this is such a complicated subject, and we sort of dedicated this week to learning more about relationships, and hopefully you'll enjoy the process of relationships better as you go on into your life. But it is about realizing that, look, I'm not trying to give you really big fancy answers here. What we're just trying to do is highlight an important process for you to begin. And so, there's loads to learn, and some of it is incredible. But at the moment, the goal here today is to just reduce this down to the most common, the most obvious denominators so we can begin this process of repairing or doing them years of reconstruction that lay ahead of us. Because again, it's funny, it's just funny because about 9 minutes before we come online, I got a call from somebody who's been in recovery for like a couple of decades. They've been sponsoring someone else who's been around recovery for a couple of decades. And they said, "You got 10 minutes?" I said, "No, mate, I've only got 9 minutes." And then they discussed about, they've got these sponsees that are relapsing. They're both on crack. They live together. They get recovery together. They relapse together. And it's just been going on and on and on. And he just wanted to check. The process that he was in is, do I think it's okay for him to tell this other guy, "Look, man, I think you need to separate for a period of time and actually start working your program like properly." And so again, it's like, and again, it was just telling him the same thing. Hopefully, we're going to say, yeah, that they, when you actually get them people, when them people phone me up or I get to work with them and they say, "Well, I've been working the program for 20 years and I keep relapsing," it's like, well, let's have a look at what program you're working. Are you actually working this program or your program? And it always turns out they're working their program, not this program. And so the important elements of this program, they generally miss out. You know, that's what it says when you read Into Action about when you start in step 5, that they've learned that people leave out important parts of their let me just quickly read from it. It says, "If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time and time again, newcomers try to keep certain facts to themselves about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods, and invariably they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. They took infantry, all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock." And again, I can confirm that in my experience, that whenever people have been around a while and they've been relapsing, you know, I think there's only one reason that you relapse, and that's powerless. And so, you know, if you're not producing fire when you're rubbing your sticks together, then your wood's probably wet. So, because I know that it's not a luck thing. If you want to make fire, then you've got to have dry wood, and you've got to rub it together at a certain speed. And it's a universal principles that if you follow the directions, then you will make fire. So when somebody comes and says, "I can't make fire," then you're going to look at their process and say, "Well, mate, look, your wood's wet. No wonder you ain't making fire." And so I believe it's the same with this, that when you follow the process, you create power. If you're not creating the power and you're powerless, then we need to look at your process to find out what part of the process aren't you doing. And inevitably, it comes down to they're holding things back. And it's usually family stuff, it's usually relationship stuff, and it's usually sex stuff, in my experience over the years. So, and again, it's not always, it says trying to avoid a humbling experience, but you know, I think maybe there's truth in that. But I also think a lot of people are actually trying to avoid a traumatic experience in themselves that they've had in their life, something they would rather, you know, avoid. But again, if it's causing you to relapse, it needs to be looked at, because if it's in you, it is going to be coming out in your life anyway. It's going to come out in your relationships. So so we're just trying to keep things simple here. Again, we're just trying to highlight the process, because there's some good processes in this, how it works in this about sex, that you can actually start working on straight away and getting some great results in life. Once you actually learn the process and it makes sense to you, then you do actually start applying it to bigger things that are more important and probably a little bit more complex. Because again, I think you guys probably all agree that human relationships are pretty complex, and so there's not usually one kind of answer. You know, it's usually like a bit of a process. And you know, again, like we said before in some of the past podcasts, that you know, I'm a great believer in the foundation. But the thing is, most people don't acknowledge how important the foundation is. You know, and the foundation, the most of our lives, is our childhoods. And if we didn't have a very good childhood, we didn't have a very good foundation that we're supposed to build on this foundation, because you can't live in a foundation. And I think that's one of the reasons that people don't tend to want to spend much time on their foundation, because they want to get straight to the building. Because you can't live in a foundation, but you do live on a foundation. Now, if your recovery is your foundation, you don't want to live in recovery, but you certainly want to live on it. You can't live in a foundation, you live on a foundation. And so it's important to build a good foundation. And if you're going to be successful in relationships, you're going to have a good foundation for that, because they're very complex and very difficult. And the reason a lot of people fail and fall down is usually because they've not got a very good foundation. You know, some people have, like the one shoe, they sort of have some sort of foundation, but it usually has big cracks in it and it's not really up to much. But trouble with foundation is no one's ever come to my house and said, God, you got lovely foundations. You know, the foundations is like under the ground. And a lot of, you know, being a builder in my past, there's a lot of work goes into foundations. But no one ever notices the foundations. All that work underground that supports what's on top. People tend to focus what's on top, so they never give enough importance to their foundations. And again, we know the old Bible stories that if you're building on sand, then your building's going to come crumbling down at some point. Now, you may have somewhat foundations, but if you've only got the foundations of a bungalow and you're trying to build a house or trying to put flats on it, and then people come back and go, oh, my house fell down, it's like, well, mate, it's your foundations. No, but I need to build a house. I want to get the roof on. Because again, they seem more interested in the outcome than the process. And saying, look, you need to slow that down a bit. Stop trying to manipulate the outcome and focus on the process. Literally, if you can trust in the process, you don't have to think about the outcome. The outcome will just happen at the right time if you get the process right. And again, just going to keep saying it, but so many people I talk to, they just focus on the outcome all the time. Even they get in a relationship and all of a sudden they meet someone, they just want to be happy. And then for 3 months, they're really happy. And that's all they want, is to be happy. And for 3 months, they're really happy. And they think, that's it. I've hit it. I've hit the main event. I found someone I'm happy with. And then you're shaking your head, because you know that ain't going to last. Because now after 3 months, the honeymoon period's finished, and you look down and you see their ankles are a little bit thicker than you like, or their big toes a bit shorter than their next toe, or you know, whatever it is that triggers yourself off again. And then that's where you're going to find out what kind of foundation that you got. But delusion is not a good foundation for a relationship. And I think, sorry, I've got to have a little laugh about that. I might have to say that again. Delusion isn't a good foundation for a relationship. Oh, God. When you work in a rehab, that's so funny when you put it like that. It's like people build these like castles in the sky and then they all go and try and live in them. And you're like, look, that ain't going to work. That's totally built on delusion. If you look at the past history of yourself and that other person, there's literally no foundation to believe you can live in that castle. But you can live in that castle if you're willing to follow a better process. That's the point. So anyway, the bottom of page 68, we're having a look at there. And so we've looked at resentment, which is like the number one offender. We've looked at fear, which is a big problem for a lot of us. And now the third thing that is offering up as an important thing is sex. But again, we think that's more relationships, but again, probably more aimed at people that we're like husband and wives and things like that, rather than well, not other people. But it does. These principles do apply in all of our relationships, as far as I can tell. So it says now about, it's at the bottom of page 68, now about sex. Many of us needed an overhaul in there, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find that human opinions run to extremes, absurd extremes. Perhaps one set of voices cried that sex is the lust of a lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or it's the wrong kind. They see the significance everywhere. One school would have no flavour of flair, and the other would just have on a straight pepper diet. The straight pepper diet means, you know, like sex, sex, sex. And the no flavour of flair means not, don't do it too much at all. He says, we want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbitrator of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We hardly be human if we didn't. But what can we do about them? So again, I think certainly being a human myself and sort of growing up and going through many stages, I mean, certainly talking to teenagers about sex and adults, it's not the same kind of deal. And, you know, we all go through different um, sexual development and the way we behave in our lives, you know, so it's one thing you learn when you actually start talking about sex and learning about sex, even from the point of view of therapy and spirituality, it is a very complicated subject that can bring up a lot of, you know, is that healthy or is that moral, or, you know, is this addiction or is that just is that morality? I mean, I've even been on courses learning about sex addiction, and even there it was very complicated to separate what's kind of like healthy, what's unhealthy, because it varies from person to person what they're kind of doing, and then it's hard to think, you know, if I keep my morality out of it, what I believe you should be doing based on my spiritual principles isn't necessarily what everyone else wants to do or believe. So it's always a very complicated subject, because it's, you know, it does vary from, you know, like you're saying there, from an extreme of, you know, you should only have sex in marriage and even then only to reproduce, to, you know, being the kinkiest pervert that ever walked the planet. There's a massive gulf in between, and who's to say what's right and wrong? That's what they're saying. I've got my views, but I'm going to stick to what it's saying here. That and so it's always difficult talking about sex with people and the way they behave. And again, at different times in their life, we're all going to behave a little bit different. And so I think I'm going to leave it where they're leaving, and so I'm not going to get too deep into that because it's so complicated. And it's and when I say that, it's not that there isn't answers. It's just it's a very long conversation that needs to be had. So if you really want to learn about, you know, sexual behaviours of humans, it's a long conversation where there's no really easy answers. And so I don't want to address that right here. I'm just trying to bring this down to maybe like a simpler relationship of you know, keeping it in the parameters of, you know, somebody in a relationship that they've been involved with a partner, and they've been drinking, and that's been causing them issue. So we're going to sort of keep it into that context at the minute. And because again, even they can change. You know, some people have open relationships, some people are swingers, and all different kinds of things. And who's to say they're right or wrong according to this? Nobody. So we will leave that alone and move on. So it says we review our conduct. That's the important bit here. We're going to look at our own conduct. And it says over the years, where had we been? So when we're doing the sex review, as you know, you write down in the columns, where have we been selfish, dishonest or inconsiderate? Whom had I hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion or bitterness? Now, where there's a lot of hurt and harm in our relationships, again, that's something that we really need to do. So if you've sort of jumped over this or not given this enough time, you should really spend some time breaking it down and having a good think about, the way that you've been conducting your relationships over the years. Again, if your relationships are all fantastic and working well, then that's up to you. It says, where were we at fault? That's kind of what we're trying to look at. What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. So again, there's just instructions there that just need to be followed. I can't say too much about that. It's pretty clear. It's a review. It's a part of the infantry. We're going to write down all our relationships and subject them to a test, this test. It said, and the reason for that is it's saying in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound idea of our future sex life. Now I think we're getting into the bit that I'm interested in that's kind of crucial, because it's a case of like, getting people to sort of say, look, because again, you can look on the hand of somebody that's been dominant in a relationship and they've been calling all the shots, but then you might be the person that's actually not been necessarily the dominant person in a relationship, but you've been willing to go along with what other people want to try and please them, maybe ultimately to get your own needs met. But it's not really fitted into your idea of your what's a sane idea of your future sex life and relationships. And again, it's one of the things I certainly find with people that come from these dysfunctional families, these dysfunctional backgrounds, that there's this real process of devaluing goes on. And not only do we, when I say devalue, we tend to start having very low expectations for ourselves. We start lowering our standards, and we start having a very low expectation of the way that we want to be treated, or we let other people treat us. And it can almost be impossible for somebody from that background to say, look, this is my standard, this is how I want to be treated, and if you don't accept me because of what I believe or my standard, then I don't want to be in a relationship with you, because I'm not going to allow myself to continually be degraded. So it could go very deep for some people, that when you listen to their stories, that a lot of them are degrading themselves, degrading other people, but also allowing themselves to be degraded. And we can all probably agree that without a doubt, we can certainly see where that can happen where sex is concerned. It's a very powerful part of who we are, and it goes right to the core of us. And a lot of us can be very degraded by it in so many ways, even for, the way we look, the size of our parts. It can be very degrading, very troublesome for people that don't have a very good sense of themselves. So I think, for me, what I read from this, that it is very important at this point in your life, in your program, is to start saying, look, what is your ideal? How would you like to be treated in a relationship? What is it that you're really looking for in life? Because maybe you've been so disappointed by your upbringing, by people, that you've really reduced your expectations to try and be satisfied accepting a low standard, but now you're constantly disappointed. Now again, some people may say, well, you need to, lower your standards. I mean, my mates used to say that, lower your standards, increase your odds. But they say lower your standards, you could get to a point where you actually don't expect too much from yourself or for yourself or from other people. And sorry, I lost my train of thought then. Let me just think a second, sorry. Because I'm just trying to, I've got the process. There's a process that happens, from our family, where we become, we see our mum and dad that may have got married, and they become disappointed in their marriage, and that can often bleed into the children, and then the children feel disappointed, and then the people that even stay together could start accepting a lower standard or a lower expectation. Well, that's what I was trying to get to. But even through my life, people have said to me, you've got too high expectations. Well, now I think there is some truth in that, but I don't think that's the truth. In actual fact, I think in quite a lot of areas of my life, I've had very low expectations. And even when I meet them low expectations, I'm still disappointed. So I think it's very reasonable that people have said to me, you just want everyone to be perfect. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. But I do think there is a reasonable standard of expectation for me to accept or expect from somebody, whether that's in relationship or at work or cleaning my car or doing my garden or in a restaurant or, in a dental surgery. I think there's a reasonable standard of expectations that I should expect from that person to offer me a reasonable service at a reasonable standard. And so I think it is important to have a look at your expectations. Because if you're somebody like me that's felt very disappointed in my life, and I think with good reason, I think I had every reason to be disappointed in my parents. I don't think there's anything wrong with me being disappointed in the low standard of parenting I was receiving. And it took me years of therapy to realise that actual fact, me being disappointed was a very healthy emotion given the circumstances. So even in recovery, people may have tried to tell me, look, that you shouldn't be disappointed. And it's no, you should well bloody be disappointed. But again, the world and the people were quite often wrong. But what are you going to do about it? Can't stay disappointed. But it was a very good emotion to realise that I was receiving a very low standard of parenting in some areas. But it doesn't mean I need to continue my life expecting that same standard from everybody I'm in a relationship with, which seems to be the ongoing knock-on effect of a lot of people that come from them sort of backgrounds. And so again, even in, like I say it again, I know I might be repeating myself, but I think this is so important to try and understand. I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can. I'm certainly going to do a workshop on this about expectations because, again, I've found that through my childhood and not having that mind changed, that feeling of let down has been a big problem in my life, but it has a knock-on effect as well. It leads to this creation in me of being afraid to tell people what I want and what I expect in relationships. And that's been quite an important thing to learn for me because otherwise people keep offering me or doing things I don't want and I don't tell them and I just get angry and resentful at them. And so, again, it took a long time for me to learn to be able to do that and be quite comfortable with my reasonable level of expectations. When they become unreasonable, then I'll adjust them. so it's important, and so because that's all been part of my trying to get a sane idea, because I never had a sane idea of good relationships. I've never had really good models in my life of what a sane, functioning relationship looks like. And so, so when sitting and thinking about that and matching it up with what's going on inside me, I started to build a sane idea of my expectations. And it's an ongoing thing. It's still happening in my life. And where I'm not actually doing that, I'm actually paying for it, and I'm not happy. But again, because it comes from my childhood, I tend not to do anything about it because I'm so accustomed to that. And it's only then through infantry that I managed to catch it. And then it's like, well, now I can start doing something to change it. But that usually means I'm going to have to work through a lot of fear, a lot of feeling of not good enough, a lot of feeling of being wrong, and plenty of other uncomfortable feelings. But I want to be liberated by that, because it denies me a chance to be myself ultimately. So it says we subject each relation to this test. Now this is an incredible test. This is a simple test, and you can apply this to almost every area of your life, not just this one. But this is an incredible test for spiritual people. This is an incredible test if you want to develop good relationships in your life. This is an incredible test. It's a simple test, and you can do it anywhere, at any time, on anything. And the test is this: is it selfish or not? Is it selfish or not? That's the test. Now that's, if we've been practicing this program, that also becomes sort of part of your meditation. This is the question that you make, because it says, look, we ask God to mold our ideas. So following that, go straight into that prayer that we ask. We ask God to mold our ideas and help us live up to them. Because again, even as a child, why I felt so let down and so unhappy by my parents in some of the areas of their parenting, I'd never read any books. I never had any real external knowledge of why I felt disappointed or hurt or let down. I didn't know where that sense of, this is wrong, what's happening here. What was happening to me, I kind of knew was wrong. I don't know why. Well, I do now. It was coming from a deeper part of me. There was a part of me, my conscience was telling me that what was happening to me was wrong. And that's the bit I want to re-hook up with now. Because on top of that feeling, I got all twisted by all kinds of false ideas, dodgy ideas, twisted doctrines, twisted belief systems. So I want to get back to that part of me that was telling me then, look, what you're experiencing is wrong. But now I've got a little bit more mind that can help me reevaluate that and put it in a better perspective, so I can get over it and learn from it and move on. But I don't want to deny myself anymore. So when myself says something's wrong, I don't care what anyone else thinks initially. Initially, I care what I think, and then I start the process of asking other people what they think. But ultimately, I ask God to mold my ideas that I want to live up to. See, again, I notice this when I start reading this, it sort of really breaks down on this book's claim of this is for agnostics and atheists, because this is quite deep God stuff. But again, I guess that can be whatever you want it to be. And I guess why it lays that bit at the beginning about, look, when we say the word God, you're going to have to interpret that into whatever that is that you believe. You're going to have to be your own interpreter here. But it just seems difficult for me to to figure out how you're going to do that. But just wanted to say that because I feel a little bit uncomfortable still thinking of the people that don't really have a faith or not much faith talking in these terms. I don't want to frighten anyone off from this principle of following this process. So it says we ask God, which is again is that prayer to mould our ideas and help us live up to them. We remember that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, should neither be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Now, I've got to give a must warning here, because in AA they say there's no musts. Well, we're just about to encounter two of them. So just a must disclaimer that there is actually musts coming up. So please turn away if you're offended by musts. He says, whatever our idea turns out to be, so that getting that idea down is important. You can sit and you can get your pen and paper and you can write whatever you like. You can write whatever you like, whatever, because again, this is all going to become part of this, this meditation, this prayer and meditation, this visualization. It's important for you to visualize what you dream about in life. It's important for you to visualize about what kind of a person that you like, what kind of a person that you want, what kind of a relationship that you want, because the stronger that you can get that in the mind, the less chance that you're just going to settle for that low standard and then become very unhappy. And so it is important to build that up. Now, for people in recovery, because again, I think the way that we've lived our life, we can tend to settle. We can tend to settle, but we're never happy doing that. Now, again, when I say sometimes you've got to change the relationship, it doesn't mean you need to change the person. I'll say that again. When we say often you need to change the relationship, it doesn't always mean change the person. It just means change the relationship with that person. So even if you've been living in a very low standard relationship, it's not going to, they're not going to want to hear you straight away. But again, you're going to want to start increasing the standards of your relationship. Again, it don't pay to do that too quick with people you've been abusing for the last 20 years. So it says, whatever our idea turns out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. Now, again, that's a process. It's not like going to say that there's going to be some big event where you're going to end up in this perfect relationship. That just doesn't happen. That's just unrealistic. But we're going to work towards it. It says we must be willing to make amends where we have done harm. Again, that's an important foundation that we're going to start on, but that's going to be ongoing. It's an ongoing thing that we're going to learn how to do that, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. So again, I think that's obviously looking at talking to somebody that's sort of just written this infantry, and there's all kinds of infidelity and behaviours that you wouldn't want anybody to catch out. It's saying, look, we're gonna have to do something with them. We can't just have you running around with all that on your conscience. We're gonna have to figure out how we can straighten this out. But again, that's just the beginning of the ongoing process. It's, in other words, we treat sex as we would with any other problem in meditation. So again, there's that contemplative bit, and then it says we ask God. So there it's saying in meditation and prayer that we ask for the right answers. We're trying to get God to tell us what we believe He should do. But the truth is, people are going, that's not God outside yourself. That's this power that's coming inside yourself. So it's almost also like asking your higher self. And I think when it starts coming out, it's like you should be in agreement with it. You should agree with what you're discovering when you're going through this process, that it shouldn't be, it's not like, I think people can think, well, what if God's trying to get me to do something I don't want to do? And it's like, well, I'm sure if that's the case, it's only because what you're doing is causing you harm and other people harm, and that's why you're feeling shit. So if you want to keep doing that and you want to keep feeling shit, then keep doing what you want to do. But if you want to start having a better conscience and feeling more satisfied, because if you are doing that, you're never going to be satisfied anyway. But if you actually want to be satisfied, then you should probably follow this process. It will lead you to satisfaction. And I'm pretty sure most people that have done that will concur that they're satisfied as much as they can be in their lives after practicing this development, and they are living in more of a sane idea. um, that I mean, I've been doing this and I kind of living in that place in my relationship where I kind of thought was way beyond possible for me. And so I can only again say that I can only give you the stamp on this. So it said, we asked God what we should do about each specific matter. So again, it's not a different solution that was in the resentment or in the fear or in the agitation. It's exactly the same simple process. It's just relaxing, take it easy. If you've got a problem, write it down, start seeking God, start doing your meditation, start doing your visualization, open yourself up to allow your mind to open in each specific matter. He said the right answer will come if you want it. So again, it's exactly the same answer in them that we found all through the book. It's a process. It's a process. He said God alone could be the judge of our sex situation. He said, but counsel with another person is often desirable. Now, I think that's key, that we find people that we can consult with. I have that in my life. Today, you know, I've listened to Boris last night. You know, I had to sleep on it and think about it. And today I've already spoke to 3 people to get some counsel because I've got to make some decisions. And so, you know, and tomorrow I've got a managers meeting where I'm going to gather all that information and then I'm going to present it to them so they can check my reasoning. If they can add to that reasoning, then we can allow my thought process to change, because I want to get the best outcome. So people say, what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm still going through the process just like they are. But I'm happy with the process. I've got no anxiety. I've got no concerns. No more than, you know, you naturally should have, I'd say. Because I trust in the process. And I know that as I go through this process, I'm going to end up where I'm meant to end up. And I believe that'll be in God's will. And whatever happens at that point, I'm okay with. Don't know what the outcome's going to be, except I'm confident it's going to be the best outcome I can hope for, because I've been following this process for years. And so I feel satisfied with whatever the outcome is going to be. And I don't have to worry about, you know, what I want to put first is people. So I'm not having to worry about, you know, my image or anything else. It's like I want to put what I think is most important to God, and what I believe most important to God is people. So I'm going to put that first, and then everything else can come after that. And so whatever's best for the people, including myself, that's all I want. The same in my relationship with my wife. I want what's best for her, and I want what's best for me, and I want what's best for the people around us. And that's the real revelation to me, that actual fact, if we ever nearly get in arguments, it's usually arguing over what we think's best for each other. Because I want the best for other people, it's not just myself, because I'd like to think I'm not selfish anymore. And so seeking counsel, especially on the difficult stuff, is going to be desirable. Now, when you don't want to seek counsel, it's because you just want to do what you want to do, probably. That's what I've discovered, is that when people stop seeking counsel with you, that your sponsor, it's usually they don't want to risk you saying anything that may upset the outcome they're hoping for. See, when you put more faith in the process than trying to manipulate the process to get the outcome you want, then you're going to get on better, that I can guarantee. But if you're manipulating people to try and create the outcome you want before you're willing to enter into the process, then you're probably going to end up where self wants you to end up. You're probably going to end up where your ego wants you to end up. You're probably going to end up with fear wants you to end up. And if I believe what this program says, which I do, it says you're going to end up in misfortune. You're going to miss your fortune. So again, just write that down somewhere if you've got a pen and paper. Is don't manipulate to get the outcome that you want. Learn to trust the process. As soon as you find yourself manipulating people to get the outcome that you want, you're probably in self. So be careful of that. And so if you find other people around you that are just interested in the process rather than just trying to, because they know that because they also believe that if they can get you to create healthy processes, then you're going to get the best outcome you can expect anyway. But if you're just looking at manipulating the outcome and using the process for that, you're not got a very good process. He said, we realise that some people are fanatical about sex as others are loose. He's saying that again. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short of the chosen idea and stumble, does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but it's only half a truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe that we will be forgiven. We will have learned our lesson. So obviously it's kind of realising that, and again, you notice that in rehab, some people have got sex problems and others aren't. And so, some people have got addiction to sex and some people haven't. And so again, like with the addiction to alcohol, the difference being is when you tell one group of people that what they're doing is causing them harm, they either have the ability to stop or moderate. The people that sexually can't stop or moderate, they're the people with the addiction. So just telling them to stop doing it is not really going to help them much. They need some form of treatment to help them stop doing it. And so, but it's still saying that if people carry on in that selfish manner, it probably is going to take them back to relapsing. But again, there's a hell of a lot of information that needs to be known before you can really understand what's going on there for them people, and just don't have time to get into that and this group. So, you know what? It says here, to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right idea, that's an instruction, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It's quite imperative urge when to yield would mean headache. Because again, I think what you certainly realise, and it was certainly true in my life at the beginning of my recovery, that, if self is the root of our suffering and our problems, when you first meet somebody, remember we're using drugs, we're using alcohol to get out of ourselves or get away from ourselves. When you first meet somebody and you're getting attraction to them, then when you're thinking about them all the time and not yourself, that is going to be quite a blissful state. So really that, love at first sight is not really love at first sight. That love at first sight is just your ego dropping. And it's a blissful state. And as soon as they do something or trigger yourself again, that's why the first 3 months is always really nice, because you spend time thinking about them instead of yourself. And that's why you start filling your body with serotonin. And that's what feels nice. It's not love, it's serotonin. But, you could say that about all love, but that's kind of like a bit can get a little bit out of balance. And that's why a lot of people that are sex addicts or have them sort of problems, they just keep going from one relationship to the next because they can't deal with any relationship. They just want the chemical release. and that causes all kinds of masturbation and all that sort of stuff. But it's not really helping you form healthy relationships. So I'll finish on this. So even if you've got them kind of problems, stop doing it isn't really the goal. It's kind of good to be abstinent in a lot of that stuff. But the real goal of all of this is to get you into healthy, fulfilling, satisfying relationships with yourself and other people. And that's what this program and this process is trying to lead you to. It's not just about stopping, bad behaviors. It's about helping you to become satisfied in your relationships, whatever that is in your healthy ideas. So again, have to cut it a bit short, but that's all the time I've got today.